G'day guys, Mac with the Our Circle, and today's episode is What Broke the Fans? Tau. The video today was actually inspired by a conversation I had with a gentleman in a Games Workshop store of all places. The guy collected Kroot. He'd built a large Kroot army up, he had it in his armies on parade, converted Narloks, Krootogs, Shapers, all that kind of thing in this army. And that's cool. It's great to see people take like a niche thing and make it their own if they fall in love with it. Totally for it. And he may have a little unhealthy appetite for them, considering how many there were, but I won't kink shame him here. In any case, it really got me thinking about the parent faction and how roles have changed over time within it. The change of diversity within the force and the fluff, you name it. So let's dive in and have a look at the army we all love to hate. Let's start with 3rd edition and the origins of the army. The 3rd edition of the game was where we first met the Tau. Prior to this edition, some of their subservient subspecies, such as the Kroot, had existed within the lore, cue terrible picture, and some bizarre artwork did manage to make its way into the 3rd edition rulebook of all places. Gav Thorpe actually began developing what eventually would become the Tau in the early 1990s, and the story goes that he initially conceived them as a counterpart to the Lizardmen faction in Warhammer Fantasy. And in the same way that the Eldar are the counterpart of the High Elves, he called them the Shishel. Like the Lizardmen, the Shishel had a caste-based society. The Shishel had 5 castes: Earth, Air, Fire, Water, and Spirit. The race was ruled by a caste of Psykers. In 1999, Thorpe revisited his Shishel concept when Games Workshop asked him to develop a new army for 40,000. The caste system then became part of the new Tau race. The Spirit caste was renamed Ethereal, and the Ethereals became non-psychic so as to differentiate them from the Eldar Seer Councils. Whereas most of the races in Warhammer 40,000 are based upon Tolkien-type fantasy races. Eldar are based on High Elves, Orcs on Orcs, that sort of thing. The culture and technology of the Tau was actually heavily inspired by Japanese science fiction. This idea was proposed by Jess Goodwin, who was a sculptor at Games Workshop, as a way to attract new players who weren't interested by the overall fantasy and space theme of the other Warhammer 40,000 races. Now, unofficially, the company wanted to expand into the Asian market, with their first stores starting to open up in the region in this time. And understanding the strong appeal of robot-based manga, the company concluded that they would best tackle the market with their own mechs, and sort of cashing in on the already established mecha fan base that was out there. The caste system deliberately echoes the martial arts and caste systems of actually East Asia, with the ethereal ruling class coming across as a sacred priesthood, such as the Kannushi from Japan, or perhaps more fittingly the Daoshi, a Taoist, get it, Taoist, priest from China. Also, I probably murdered the pronunciation of both those names, so feel free to correct me in the comments below, as I am clearly not an Asian speaker. As for the miniatures range, the practical limitations of design at the time meant that they would be unable to craft large miniatures in plastic, and more niche units, such as the broadside battlesuit, would require white metal upgrades, as their own custom kit and unique and different kits to the crisis suit would just simply be impractical. All significant upgrades and characters, therefore, all contained or were wholly made up of white metal. The entire range upon release can be summed up as the Shazo, the Ethereal, Crisis Suits, Stealth Suits, Fire Warriors, Pathfinders, Kroot, the Kroot Shaper, the Krootogs, Broadside Battle Suits, Devilfish, and lastly, the Hammerhead with Railgun only. Drones were few and actually an ancillary unit of perhaps 1 or 2 drones attached to anything else, and that was the entire Codex if I'm remembering it correctly. Now, according to several sources, Andy Chambers, the chief designer at the time, stated that the Tau were intended to be altruistic and idealistic, believing heartily in unification as the way forward. Graham McNeil, who was responsible for a lot of the background material produced for them, developed what Andy Chambers described as their proud, quiet, but determined character, and developed it to the point where they actually became rather likeable, if slightly naive addition to the game and cosmos. so the story goes. Now 4th and 5th edition, this is where they started to expand the Tau a little bit. The introduction of the ion cannon to the arsenal, useless as it was at the time, sniper drone teams, also the Vespid, or as Marine players came to know them at the time, those fuckers that sought to power armor in droves. Also at this time we met the Piranha, the Skyray, as well as the introduction of fucking marker lights. The annoying gimmick weapon which apparently, despite having the same technology, no other race employs because, derp. Apart from that, the fluff didn't really change. The Tau expansions continue in the same vein as before, and we get some interesting characters and the concept of different types of battlesuits and commanders we hadn't seen before. Basically, stock standard stuff. Now, 6th edition, well, this is the meat of the story. 6th edition is where we first started to see some big change-ups. Lore-wise, the Tau was starting to turn nefarious, with the ethereal casts turning out to be string pullers hell-bent on domination, the introduction of disgraced generals, Farsight going his own way, and the tech of the Empire was being seriously ramped up with the addition of the Riptide battlesuit. Gameplay-wise, the Tau was supplemented by a far more powerful commander, who was known for buffing units significantly, and the broadside missile spam. The aforementioned Riptide battlesuit was also a game-breaking entity, and the first Tau Uber unit. Now, what is an Uber unit? Well, as mentioned in several other videos, this is the term I've coined for the large kits released in Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40,000 from 2011 onwards, such as the Riptide, Wraith Knight, Dread Knight, Necrosphinx, Mutalith, Mauler Fiend, etc., etc. I could go on. These are large units which are designed to be a must-take in your force, and are often cheaper than they should be, and their rules are written with selling the kits in their mind first and foremost, but I must say they don't always achieve that goal. Now, what did this actually mean in, well, gameplay and lore terms? Well, it's the first gameplay/lore cracking point for the Tau, as you now had a large monstrous creature, so powerful that you'd be foolish to not take one, and this led to armies generally having 2 to 3 of them in their arsenal, despite the fluff explicitly stating that their rarity within the Empire was due to a lack of materials, and there was probably only a few dozen in commission at any time. Well, didn't matter, because whilst this alone didn't ruin anything, it did start to spoil the immersion somewhat, because to visit any store or tournament, you'd only be confronted by a force of minimum squads of Fire Warriors or Kroot, and dozens of Riptides and Tau commanders who buffed them on every single table. Further to this, they were a downright nasty addition to the game, able to absolutely pepper assault armies, which generally got a lot worse in 6th edition, with no charging from vehicles and variable assault ranges both hampering them significantly. If the assaulting army got close to the battle suits, the suits could actually overcharge and effectively jump over the enemy force and away to safety. And whilst not common, I did once see a Khorne Berserker force preparing for a turn 4 mass charge, having made it all the way across no man's land, only for 2 Riptides to jump 30 inches clean over their heads and safely out of their assault range for the entire rest of the game. Fun and balanced gameplay right there. By the way, the Berserker player quit the game after that. The broadsides also added to this with their ability to shoot multiple high-strength missiles each, with accompanying drones also adding the weight of fire of multiple missiles with their own missile pods. And the Tau commander, who was guaranteed to be attached to them, his job was to increase the ballistic skill of the unit, ignore cover, grant night vision, that sort of thing. This combination of buffing commander, Riptides and broadsides was further supplemented by the addition of the Sky Shield landing pad, which was a purchasable fortification in 6th edition, and which, when said units were deployed within it, they gained a 3+ invulnerable save. What the fuck? This was further worsened by the Allied Matrix, which was introduced with seemingly little to no thought as to how balance would be affected, and the prolific Taudar, a combination of Eldar and Tau, which involved the broken Eldar and the broken Tau plugging each other's weaknesses, and the Tau further having their ranged firepower improved and supplemented by Farseers casting psychic blessings on them. So, I'm sure at this point of the video, people are wondering why I'm pointing out the meta of the game so much. Well, it's important because this is where the traditional Tau army, composed of mostly fire warriors, with some close combat capable crews sprinkled in there to defend them, some short range hit and run battle suits to knock out enemy tanks, terminators, heavy armor, that sort of thing. Well, these were all superseded completely by larger battle suits. No longer was it viable to use Kroot or Vespid. The firepower and resilience of the enemies had simply increased too much, outstripping their capabilities. The Fire Warrior didn't offer enough to be included in anything more than minimum quantity, as they were wasting valuable game-winning points which the battlesuits could use instead. This was further worsened by the arrival of the Farsight Enclave's sub-codex, which practically did away with the Force Org chart entirely by allowing crisis suits to be taken as troops. And worse yet, the very first data slates which were introduced in Warhammer 40,000 included some for the Tau, which gave you a Riptide and a unit of 3 broadsides without using any Force Org slots, and it was cheaper in points. Absolutely game-breaking. From this point on, the Tau were no longer the Asian-inspired force which used a harmonic combination of earth, fire, water, and air castes, with the ethereals at their head and a mix of subservient races to fight their battles. Instead, Gundam Wing Tau was now the future. The Tau were always a gunline army, to be fair, and a bit of a pain to play against, but they weren't outright despised until 6th edition. If people played Tau, or even Necrons and Eldar in this edition, they were instantly disliked simply for the choice of faction, regardless of if they'd stuck with the faction through years of poor codexes, lack of releases, or being outright ignored by the company. They finally got a strong codex, and instead the community hated them for it. Why? Because the company couldn't balance the lists, and so the viable lists naturally were not fun to play against, and made people angry at the players who exploited the rules rather than the company that wrote them. Then we reached 7th edition, and it was really just more of the same. When 7th edition came out, it managed to at least fix the Tau list somewhat, but was otherwise just 6th edition Tau all over again, which isn't surprising considering how little time 7th actually hung around for and the fact it didn't get a new codex. Suddenly though, 8th edition happens. The Tau in 8th are in an interesting place. The addition of Ghost Keel and Storm Surge suits build upon the already mech-heavy army, adding more and more large units and sadly not building upon the infantry. The infantry, of course, well, the Fire Warriors are now broken up into 2 types, Breachers and Strike Teams. The Strike Teams bringing the DS8 Tactical Support Turret. Now, with the Kroot, their only saving grace at this point was the ability to take a Krootox, a larger, heavier weapon designed to supplement their squad. Well, the addition of the DS8 turret negated the Kroot's last niche. You see, the Kroot now fight as badly as Tau in close combat. They shoot worse than any Fire Warrior, they have less armour, less firepower, and they cost more points. The Vespid are being pretty much rendered useless by crisis suits in much the same way. Also, as 8th edition is a much less assault-oriented edition, exemplified by the Primaris who utterly lack any true assault units, there is even less need for a counter-assault or shield line of Kroot. The background fluff already has the writing on the wall for the Kroot and Vespid. With the Tau having a tunnel through the warp in their possession, they have systematically killed the other races, as they can be corrupted by chaos upon entering it. Further to this, the Dark Eldar have all but purged the Kroot in their raiding. So, to sum it up, the Tau, so far as I can see it, are being sent down one path and one path alone by Games Workshop. This path is a force almost entirely mounted within battlesuits of some kind. The other races within the faction are contrary to this goal, totally different sculpts requiring attention that frankly I don't see the company giving them. It's a shame, because there was scope to make some interesting units. Earth, air and water casts all play a second fiddle in the game to the fire cast, so much so that you may as well not have the cast present and really be on the background wall. The ethereal is used a little bit more now, but again is not the unit which led every Tau army in 3rd and 4th edition. We could have had unique aircast jump troops, earthcast field fortifications, watercast intelligence troops, firecast samurai-style infantry, but instead it's battle suits, and only battle suits from here on out. As for the lore and background, the Tau can't expand forever, not without the divine hand of the company rider coming down like a vengeful fist of God. The most likely route that I see will be due to the upheaval of the events Abaddon has set in motion. It will lead to the Tau leaning more and more heavily on their technology, and we'll only see bigger and stronger battlesuits leading them, which Games Workshop will gladly supplement with the appropriate models. So, what broke the fans? Well, nothing really. As always in this series, the fans weren't broken, they simply piss and moan and the show goes on. But it is interesting to note where the Tau are now, compared to where they were 18 years ago when we first met them. Anyway, I know it's short, sharp, to the point, but I hope you all enjoyed this shorter episode of What Broke the Fans. And please, leave your thoughts and comments below. Do you think that the Vespid, the Crude is still viable? Do you think that going forward, Games Workshop will supplement them, bring out new units, that kind of thing? Personally, of course, I don't, as I said, and I gave my reasons why, but I want to know what you think. Talk to me in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next video.